I'm Melissa, and 3 hours ago I was just another poor waitress getting bullied by rich brats. Their video of my humiliation went viral in minutes. But now, black SUVs are surrounding their location, roads are blocked, and they're about to meet my father, Antonio Romano, the Mafia boss. But let me start from the beginning, because this story isn't just about revenge, it's about how quickly your world can change when you underestimate the wrong person. My name is Melissa Romano, though for the past 6 months I've been living as just Melissa Taylor, a struggling college student working part-time to pay for school. At least that's what everyone believed. You see, I chose to live this double life. While my real world consists of luxury cars, designer clothes, and bodyguards, I wanted to experience what normal people go through every day. My father, Antonio Romano, wasn't thrilled about this decision, but he respected my wishes. He gave me one condition, though: the moment anyone crossed the line, he would step in. Today, that line was obliterated. 3 hours ago, I was working my evening shift at Le Grand, one of the most upscale restaurants in the city. Ironically, my father actually owns the building, but nobody there knew that. I was just Melissa, the quiet waitress who worked hard and kept to herself. I wore my simple white uniform, carried my second-hand bag, and blended into the background perfectly. The restaurant was buzzing with its usual crowd of wealthy elites, but tonight there was a particularly obnoxious group that caught everyone's attention. 4 young people had taken the best table in the house, and from the moment they walked in, they made sure everyone knew they were important. There was Brandon Walsh, a 25-year-old trust fund baby whose father owned several failing businesses. Next to him sat Tyler Hayes, a social media influencer who couldn't put his phone down for 2 seconds. Then there was Jessica Stone, a spoiled heiress who treated everyone like her personal servants, and finally Nick Carter, who seemed to exist solely to laugh at whatever Brandon said. I should have seen the trouble coming when Tyler started filming everything, claiming he was documenting the lifestyle of the wealthy for his followers. But I was focused on doing my job, carrying a tray of expensive wine to their table. The bottle I was serving cost more than most people make in a week, but to them, it was just another accessory to show off their wealth. What happened next felt like it unfolded in slow motion, yet it was over in seconds. As I approached their table, Brandon suddenly stretched his leg into the aisle. I tried to step around it, but he shifted at the last moment, and I stumbled. The entire tray went flying, and that expensive red wine splashed all over my white uniform and crashed to the marble floor. The silence that followed was deafening. Every conversation in the restaurant stopped. Every head turned toward us. And then Brandon started laughing. Not just a chuckle, but a loud, mocking laugh that echoed through the entire dining room. "Look at this clumsy peasant," he shouted, making sure his voice carried to every corner of the restaurant. "She can't even walk properly." Tyler immediately had his phone out, filming everything. "This is gold," he said, zooming in on my wine-stained uniform. "Broke girl serves rich people and fails miserably." Jessica joined in with her shrill voice. "She probably can't even afford to replace that wine. Look at those cheap clothes she's wearing." She turned to the other diners like she was performing for an audience. "This is why poor people shouldn't work in nice places." Nick, being the follower he was, added his own cruel comment: "She should pay for our entire meal after ruining our evening." But Brandon wasn't finished. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a few crumpled bills, throwing them at my feet like I was some kind of beggar. "Here," he said with disgust dripping from his voice, "buy yourself some real clothes. Maybe then you'll be worthy of serving your betters." Standing there in my wine-stained uniform, with money scattered around my feet and the entire restaurant staring at me, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: true helplessness. Not because I actually was helpless, but because, in that moment, I was playing a role, and that role was being completely destroyed. Tyler had already uploaded the video to his social media accounts with the caption, "Watch this broke girl get owned by success. Such a broke waitress challenge. Know your place. Served." Within minutes, his followers were sharing it, adding their own cruel comments. The manager, Mr. Wilson, came rushing over, but instead of defending his employee, he was more concerned about appeasing the wealthy customers. "I'm so sorry for this incident," he said to Brandon's table, completely ignoring me. "This is absolutely unacceptable." Brandon, feeling empowered by the manager's reaction, became even more aggressive. "I want her fired immediately," he demanded. "This kind of incompetence is exactly why poor people stay poor. They don't have what it takes to succeed." Jessica chimed in. "She should be banned from all decent establishments. People like her need to learn their place in society." Mr. Wilson, seeing dollar signs and fearing a bad review from influential customers, turned to me with an expression I'll never forget. "Melissa, you're fired. Clean yourself up and leave immediately. We can't have this kind of behavior representing our establishment." The walk through that restaurant to the exit was the longest of my life. Not because I was actually devastated, but because I was witnessing firsthand the cruelty that people like me, people playing roles as working-class individuals, face every single day. Tyler followed me with his camera, documenting my walk of shame for his followers' entertainment. As I stood outside the restaurant in the cold night air, my phone started buzzing uncontrollably. The video was spreading faster than wildfire. The Broke Waitress Challenge was already trending, with thousands of people sharing, commenting, and adding their own cruel takes on my humiliation. Some were making memes, others were creating their own videos mocking service workers. But while I was reading through the horrible comments, something much more significant was happening across town. My father was in his office, handling some business matters, when his right-hand man Marco burst through the doors with his tablet in hand. "Boss," Marco said, his voice urgent, "you need to see this." "It's about Miss Melissa." I can only imagine my father's face as he watched that video. Antonio Romano is not a man who shows emotion often, but when it comes to his only daughter, that changes completely. Marco later told me that the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees as my father watched Brandon throw money at my feet and call me worthless. "Find out everything about these people," my father said in a voice that Marco described as colder than winter itself. "I want to know where they live, where they work, who their families are, and what they had for breakfast this morning, and I want it in 10 minutes. That's when my phone rang. Seeing Papa on the caller ID, I took a deep breath before answering. "Princess," came my father's voice, somehow both gentle and terrifying at the same time. "I saw what happened. Are you hurt?" "I'm okay, Papa," I replied, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. "I'm handling this now," he said, and I could hear the fury barely contained in his voice. "Papa, wait," I said quickly. "Let me handle this my way first. I want them to know exactly who they messed with, but I want to be the one to show them." There was a long pause. My father doesn't like when his family is disrespected, and his first instinct is always to handle things definitively. But he also taught me to be strong, to fight my own battles when possible. "You have 2 hours, he finally said. "If you're not satisfied with the results, I'm stepping in." And Princess, nobody, and I mean nobody, treats my daughter like that and walks away unchanged. What Brandon and his friends didn't realize is that when you humiliate a Romano, you're not just dealing with one person, you're dealing with an entire network of people who have access to information that most can't even imagine. Within an hour, I had complete files on all 4 of them, and what I discovered was both pathetic and perfect for what I had planned. Brandon Walsh was living a complete lie. His father's businesses were failing catastrophically, and Brandon himself had been using company credit cards for personal expenses, driving the company toward bankruptcy. His trust fund was nearly depleted, and he was desperately trying to maintain appearances while his world crumbled around him. Tyler Hayes, the social media influencer, had built his entire following on fake engagement. He'd bought most of his followers and was barely making enough money to cover his expensive lifestyle. His brand deals were drying up because companies were starting to realize his audience wasn't real. Jessica Stone was perhaps in the worst position of all. Her family had discovered her excessive spending and had cut off her access to the family fortune. She was living off credit cards and the kindness of friends, but she was too proud to admit her financial situation to anyone. Nick Carter was just a hanger-on who survived by befriending people like Brandon. He had no job, no income, and no real prospects. He was entirely dependent on his wealthy friends for everything from meals to housing. Looking at these files, I realized that these 4 people were not actually successful or powerful. They were desperate individuals clinging to an image of wealth and importance. They had attacked me because putting someone else down made them feel better about their own failing lives. I decided to approach this systematically. Instead of immediately revealing who I wanted them to dig their own graves deeper. I had my assistant set up a meeting with them at an exclusive private club downtown, one that my family actually owns, though that's not public knowledge. I presented myself as Sofia Martinez, a potential investor looking to partner with young entrepreneurs. I had my appearance completely transformed. Designer dress, professional styling, expensive jewelry, the kind of look that these 4 would immediately respect and try to impress. When I walked into that private dining room, not one of them recognized me. It had only been a few hours since the restaurant incident, but the difference in how I was dressed and presented myself was so dramatic that I was completely invisible to them. This told me everything I needed to know about how superficial and appearance-focused they really were. Brandon immediately launched into his pitch about his successful business ventures. Tyler tried to impress me with his social media following. Jessica name-dropped every important person she claimed to know. Nick just nodded along and tried to look important. As the evening progressed, I started dropping hints. I mentioned that I'd seen an interesting video online about a restaurant incident. I asked if they'd ever worked in service industries themselves. I talked about the importance of treating all people with respect, regardless of their economic status. But instead of showing any self-reflection or remorse, they doubled down on their cruelty. Brandon bragged about teaching that peasant girl a lesson. Tyler showed me the viral video on his phone, proud of how many views it had gotten. Jessica laughed about how pathetic the girl in the video looked. Nick just echoed whatever the others said. Finally, I couldn't take any more. I pulled out my own phone and placed it on the table, playing the viral video on the screen. "This girl," I said, pointing to myself in the video. "What did you think of her?" Brandon, still not understanding, said, "She's exactly what's wrong with society. People like her need to know their place." "And where is her place?" I asked. "Serving people like us," Jessica answered smugly. "Some people are just born to be servants." That's when I stood up and looked each of them directly in the eye. "Well then, let me introduce myself properly. My name isn't Sofia Martinez, it's Melissa Romano. And that girl you humiliated, filmed, and called worthless? That was me." The change in their expressions was immediate and dramatic. The color drained from Brandon's face. Tyler's phone clattered to the table. Jessica's mouth fell open. Nick looked like he was about to be sick. "That's impossible," Brandon stammered. You're rich. You're successful. That girl was just a what?" I asked coldly. "Just a human being trying to do her job? Just a person who deserved to be treated with basic decency?" But before any of them could respond, we heard something that made the blood drain from their faces even further. The sound of multiple car engines outside and the unmistakable noise of vehicles surrounding the building. Tyler, desperately trying to salvage the situation, grabbed his phone to call for help, but found that there was no signal. Jessica tried to use the club's landline, but the line was dead. Nick was looking around frantically for an exit, but we all heard the sound of doors being locked and secured. That's when the main entrance to our private dining room opened, and my father walked in. Antonio Romano doesn't need to announce himself or raise his voice to command a room. His presence alone is enough to make people understand that they are in the presence of someone who holds real power. He was dressed in his usual impeccable suit, but it was the men who followed him into the room that really drove the point home. 6 men in dark suits positioned themselves around the room, not threateningly, but unmistakably present. Outside, we could hear more vehicles arriving, doors slamming, and the general commotion of a significant operation being put into place. "So," my father said, his voice calm but carrying an undertone that made everyone in the room freeze. These are the young people who thought it would be entertaining to humiliate my daughter and share that humiliation with the world. Brandon tried to speak, but no words came out. Tyler was visibly shaking. Jessica had tears streaming down her face. Nick looked like he was about to faint. My father continued, "I've been watching the video that you created. I've seen how you treated my princess. I've read the comments from your followers, and I've been thinking about what an appropriate response might be." He walked slowly around the table, stopping behind each of their chairs. "You see, I've built my life around the principle that family is everything. You protect your family. You honor your family. And when someone disrespects your family, you make sure they understand the magnitude of their mistake." "Mr. Romano," Brandon finally managed to whisper, "we didn't know. If we had known who she was." My father held up a hand, and Brandon immediately fell silent. "You didn't know who she was, so you thought it was acceptable to treat her like garbage. You thought that because she appeared to be a working-class person, she deserved to be humiliated and degraded?" He walked to the window and gestured outside. "Take a look." From where we sat, we could see that the entire block had been cordoned off. Black SUVs were positioned at every corner. Men in suits were stationed at every entrance and exit. The area looked like it was under siege. "You wanted to know what real power looks like," my father said. "This is what happens when you cross the Romano family. With one phone call, I can shut down an entire city block. With another phone call, I can make sure that your faces are known to every business owner, every employer, every landlord in this city." Tyler, desperate to salvage something, said, "I'll delete the video. I'll post an apology. I'll do whatever you want." My father smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. "Oh, the video is staying up, but we're going to add some context to it." Within minutes, new videos started appearing on social media, security footage from the restaurant showing Brandon deliberately tripping me, audio recordings of their cruel comments, screenshots of their financial records showing their true situations. The narrative was completely flipped. They went from being seen as successful people putting a poor girl in her place to being exposed as desperate, failing individuals who attacked someone to make themselves feel better. What happened next was swift and comprehensive. Brandon's company, which was already hanging by a thread, suddenly found that all of their remaining clients had mysteriously decided to take their business elsewhere. Tyler's social media accounts were flooded with comments exposing his fake followers and purchased engagement. Jessica discovered that her credit cards had been canceled and her living situation had become temporarily unavailable. Nick found himself with nowhere to go and no one willing to help him. But the most poetic justice came in the form of their new employment situation. Within a week, all four of them were working service industry jobs, the very type of work they had mocked and belittled. Brandon found himself washing dishes in a restaurant kitchen. Tyler was delivering food orders. Jessica was cleaning hotel rooms. Nick was working as a janitor. And the restaurant where it all started? Mr. Wilson, the manager who had fired me and humiliated me further, discovered that his lease had been reassessed and was no longer affordable. The restaurant closed, and he found himself in the same position as his former employees, looking for work and learning what it felt like to be on the other side of the power dynamic. As I watched the aftermath unfold, I realized that this experience had taught me something valuable about both worlds I lived in. In my real life, surrounded by wealth and power, it's easy to forget what most people go through every day: the struggle to make ends meet, the vulnerability of depending on others for employment, the way that people can be cruel to those they perceive as beneath them. But I also learned something about the people who had attacked me. Their cruelty wasn't coming from a position of genuine strength or success. It was coming from their own insecurity and desperation. They attacked me because putting someone else down was the only way they could feel better about their own failing lives. The viral video that had started as my humiliation became something entirely different. It became a teaching moment about treating people with dignity regardless of their circumstances. It sparked conversations about class, respect, and the way we judge others based on appearances. 3 months have passed since that night, and I've made some decisions about how I want to live my life moving forward. I've continued working in service industries, but now I do it openly as Melissa Romano. I use my position and resources to advocate for workers' rights, fair wages, and dignity in the workplace. Brandon, Tyler, Jessica, and Nick have all learned valuable lessons about humility and respect. Some of them have genuinely changed and become better people through their experiences. Others are still struggling with the reality that their actions have consequences. As for my father, he's proud of how I handled the situation. He told me that true power isn't about destroying people, it's about teaching them and creating positive change in the world. The viral video is still online, but now it's used as an example in business ethics classes and sensitivity training programs. It serves as a reminder that you never know who you're talking to, and more importantly, that every person deserves to be treated with basic human dignity regardless of their circumstances. So the next time you're in a restaurant or a store or any place where someone is serving you, remember Melissa's story. Remember that the person helping you has their own life, their own dreams, their own story. And remember that a little kindness and respect costs nothing but can mean everything. Because you never know, that simple person you're interacting with might just surprise you. And in a world where viral videos can change everything in minutes, it's better to be known for lifting people up than for tearing them down. That's my story. That's how 4 wealthy kids learned what happens when you judge someone by their uniform instead of their character. And that's why my father's black SUVs will always be ready to roll when family is threatened, because in the Romano family, respect isn't optional, it's everything.